Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition in geometry. Today we're going to be talking about congruent triangles. We're in section 4.3 today. All right, well, let's get started. First of all, our objective today is we're going to name and use corresponding parts of congruent polygons. Okay, and so could be any polygons. The title here is triangles, but this could work for any polygon. All right, so first of all, two geometric figures, including triangles, are congruent if they have the same shape and size. So it doesn't matter which way they're turned, they're congruent, you know, so like if, I don't know how well I'm going to be able to draw congruent triangles here, but if you have one with like a short side and say a long side and then an even longer side, something like that, and that short side is congruent to this short side, and then that kind of medium side, and then that longer side. So those two, if all the measurements are the same, even though they're spun in a different way, they're still considered congruent. If one is bigger than the other one, then it would not be congruent, okay? And the main thing here is, here's the main point of our whole lesson today. In two congruent polygons, all of the parts of one polygon are congruent to the corresponding parts of the other polygon. So that means every angle, you know, in the first triangle that matches up with the same one in the other one are congruent. All the angles are congruent. All the sides are congruent. And we'll take a look at that more in depth here. All right. All right, so first of all, here's a great example of what we got going on here. So we have two triangles here. Here's a triangle ABC, and over here is HJK. All right, it's marked. All the angles and the angles and the sides are marked for us. And so if you notice, on this first one, on B here, on this angle, it's marked with one mark there, one arc. Angle J is also marked with one arc. So that means B and J are the two angles that are the same. Okay, angle A is marked with two arcs. Angle H is marked with two arcs, and so that means A and H are congruent, and then C has 3 marks and K has 3, so those two are the same. Also, you notice the sides. Side AB is 1, HJ is 1, so that means those sides are the same. And then you see so forth with the 2 marks and the 3 marks. And so that's what's happening over here. Is this is just showing you that, hey, here are the angles that are congruent to each other. And we said A has 2 marks and H has 2 marks. So that means angle A is congruent to angle H. You saw that B and J both have 1 mark, and so those are congruent to each other. And lastly, C and K. But then also all the sides, and so if you see that side AB has 1 mark, that HJ has 1 mark, and so those are congruent to each other. You see BC has 2, KJ or JK has 2, so those are congruent, and then AC has 3, and then HK has 3, and so those are congruent. And so when in congruent triangles here specifically, you're going to list out all the angles that are congruent to each other, all the sides that are congruent to each other, and then you're going to talk about a congruence statement. Okay, in the congruence statement, it has to be in the right order. Okay, so if I'm going to call this first one triangle ABC, if I go in that order, I have to go in the same exact order for the second one. So if I'm going to say ABC, I'm going, the first side that I talk about, A to B, is 1 mark. So in the second one, I have to say HJ first. And if you notice, that's what they did here, HJ. And so if I'm going from A to B is 1 mark, and then B to C is 2, I have to do it in the same order. H to J is 1 mark, J to K is 2. So I'm going to say HJK as they did here. So in other words, if you look closely, look at A and H, where the angle that matched up. Look where A is. A and H, they both come first. B and J were congruent to each other. Guess where they come? They both come second. And then C and K matched up, and so notice C and K both go third. So if you notice in that congruence statement, that it matches up in the correct order. Okay, so very, very important to pay attention to that. All right, first example we're going to look at here. Now nothing has been given to us here, but they said, you know, we want to show that they're congruent, and if you look at it, they're in the same orientation there. So let's just mark out what sides, what angles are all congruent to each other, and then we can kind of fill out this stuff over here. All right, so first of all, I'm going to start with this. I'm going to say, I'm going to call side AB, I'm going to mark that with 1 mark. Well, what matches up with side AB? It looks like it's going to be RT, so I'm going to put 1 mark there. Side BC would be like 2, and it looks like TP matches up with that. DC or CD would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, getting a lot of marks in there. All right, so we see which angles or what sides match up, and then if we want to do that, mark the angles as well. This might be a little harder because there's a lot to do here. But here A is going to be 1, which corresponds with that 1. This will be 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I didn't draw them all the way across there, but you get the idea. Okay, so a lot of stuff going on there, but this might help us later. So let's say all the angles that are matching up. So we say, well, A and R are congruent, right? So we can say angle A is congruent to angle R. Okay, that's our first match up there. What else? B and T. So we say angle B is congruent to angle T. What's the third one? C and P. Angle C is congruent to angle P. The fourth one would be what? D and S. So angle D is congruent to angle S. And then the fourth one would be E and Q. And so angle E is congruent to angle Q. Okay, so we've listed out all the angles that are congruent. Now we're going to list the sides. And so let's start with the one that we've marked with 1 here. So the first side is AB. So we can say side AB or line segment AB is congruent to what? RT. Okay, how about the second one? BC is congruent to TP. Third one, we've got CD, and that's congruent to PS or SP. And then DE is congruent to SQ. And finally, then EA Sports, it's in the game. Okay, EA is congruent to QR. Okay, so there's all the different sides that are congruent to each other. Notice we had to match those up. And so in this situation here, now it's not a triangle, so we're not going to use the little triangle symbol, but we're going to, the congruent statement, we're going to name this, I'm just going to start, because I'd started with, you know, A to B was like I marked as 1, I'm going to do it in that same order. So I'm going to say here A, B, and then C, D, E. So A, B, C, D, E. Remember, you have to go in order around the edge of it. So I'm going A, B, C, D, E around the edge. And then that is congruent to what? I have to go in the same order and start with the same letter. So if A matched up with R, I have to start with R and go around that same way. So R, T, P, S, Q is what I would say there. R, T, P, S, Q. And so what that means is A matches up with R, which is what we said here. B matches up with T. B and T come next. C and P come next. C and P, D and S, and then E and Q, E and Q. All right? Hopefully you're getting the hang of that. Hopefully that's not too bad. There's a lot of writing you have to do there, but shouldn't be all that bad. All right. Let's look at a little bit different scenario here. Okay, a little bit different here. Okay. But look what they gave. They gave us a congruent statement up here, okay? So based on this congruent statement, we can mark the triangles, we can know which ones match up. So we know that A and D have to match up with each other. So I'm going to put one arc on A, one arc on D. Notice they're not turned the same way, they're turned differently now. So this is going to be more important this time. B and E, so I'm going to do 2 marks for B, 2 for B, and 2 for E. And then C and F go together, and so that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you notice that's the way they're congruent, and so and then let's also mark the sides here. And so the side, going from A to B, going from one arc to two arcs, I'm going to put one arc on that side. So that matches up with what? On this triangle where I'm going from one arc, that corner, to that angle E, that's going to be the one mark on the side. Okay, so going from A to B is the same as D to E. And if you notice, AB is together here, right? That matches up with DE, which goes together. Okay, so then if I do BC, which is the second two, BC should match up with what? The second two here, which is E and F. Okay, so this would be 2 and 2. And then finally, the third one, the third side here, AC, would be the first and the last, which should match up with the first and the last, DF. And so if you notice, AC would be 1, 2, 3. DF would be 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got all the sides matched up. So let's see which one of these works. Angle ABC, all right, angle ABC is got 2 marks. EFD. EFD has 3 marks. Those aren't congruent. Okay, it's not that one. All right, what about B? BAC. BAC, that's got A, that's angle A there, which is 1 mark. And then DFE, DFE, that's this angle, that's 3. Nope, that doesn't work either. Okay, what about C? Side BC. BC has 2 marks. Side DE has 1 mark. Nope, that's not it either. Okay, well, hopefully it's D. So side AC has what? 3 marks. Side DF has 3 marks. So guess what? It looks like it's D. So magic red ball, come on in. It's letter D. Good. All right. That was a little trickier because it was spun, but that's why it's really important that you go ahead and mark these out here. It'd be very helpful. Okay. Second thing that we can do, knowing that we have congruent triangles, we can use these to set up and solve for variables. Okay, so notice again what they've given us. They've given us a congruence statement. All right, so what does this mean? That means angle I, and angle N match up, right? So let's do this again, if we can here. I and N match up. Again, these are spun a little bit. They're not exactly the same order. But you notice if you took this one here and kind of spun it to the left a little bit, it's going to match up with this one. T and G match up. So that means T, I'm going to put 2 marks in there, T and G. And finally, P and O, I'm going to put 3 in there. 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we kind of know what goes where, and I think from here you can probably pretty easily see as well then that the side from I to T will match up with NG. So again, IT goes together here, NG. So this would be 1 mark here, 1 and 1. And then going from 2 to 3, going from 2 to 3 here, that would be, those two would be congruent. So I'll put 2 marks there, and then this side would have 3. Okay, so we've marked how that goes together. So now how can we find X and Y? Well, let's see what we've got. Hey, we've got an X and a Y here, both in the same thing. Ooh, well, that's not going to be really good. I'll have to come at that second. So let's look at this one down here. I've got 6y minus 14. Well, that's the angle that has 3 marks. What does that match up with? That matches up with P, which is 40. So you say, oh, well, if these are congruent to each other, wouldn't 6y minus 14 have to equal 40? So that angle, let's see where my thing is right now. This would have to equal that, okay? So we're just going to do plus 14. 6y equals 54. That's what I meant to do there. And then divide by 6. And so it looks like y is 9. Okay? So y is 9. Yay, all right, well, we got y, but now how am I going to find x? Well, if you look back to the other place where we had an x, there was an x minus 2y. Well, now that I know that y is 9, what can I do? I can plug this in up here, right? So when I plug that in, this is really now going to be what? X minus 2 times 9, which is x minus 18. Okay, so I just plugged 9 in for that y to make that 18. So now all I have to do is say, well, what side is that? That's the side with 1 mark. Well, what's it match up with? The side with 1 mark, which is 7.5. So that means all I have to do is x minus 18 equals 7.5. And then I'll just do plus 18. And so then x would have to equal 25.5. Okay? Getting a feel for that, hopefully. All right, let's take a look at one more like this. Okay, again, things are situated a little bit differently here, but we do have a congruence statement. Here we've got this. So we know which ones are supposed to match up with each other. So F is supposed to match up with H. Okay, so well now you notice some of these are in 2 different triangles, so we've got to be careful here. So FHJ, so FHJ in this triangle, F, I'm going to mark that as the first one. In that triangle, F has to match up with H in the other triangle, HFG, so it's going to match up with this one. Okay, then the H in the first triangle will match up with the F in the other triangle. Okay, so that's why it's a little tricky. You got to be careful here. So that means this one here, if we make that 2, this one has to be 2. And then the J and the G will match up. So J, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Okay? And so then again, now that we know what angles match up, we can set up the sides. So you can do it kind of any way you want to. But if you notice, then that this length right here, both triangles have that same length in common, right? It's the same length for both of them, which is going from what? The angle with 1 mark to the angle with 2 marks, the angle with 1 to the angle with 2. So that side is the same for both of them. In that case, I'm going to mark them both as 1. So both of those sides are the same with 1. What can I mark with 2? Well, if I'm going from 2 to 3, I'll mark that as 2. So that means in this one, if I'm going 2 to 3 marks on the angles, this I'll mark as side as 2. And then the remaining ones here, this is 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. All right, now we just set this stuff up and work it out. Okay, so which one do you want to start with? Let's start with the angle. Okay, why not? Which is 6x plus 8. That's angle 2. That's the mark with 2 angles, 2 marks on it. What does that match up with? Well, in the other triangle, that would be this one right here, which is 35. So we're going to say 6x plus 8 has to equal 35 minus 8. So it looks like 6x would equal, what's that, 27? And then divide by 6. And so if you can see from the answers here, we're probably going to get some decimals. So 27 divided by 6, I get 4.5. Now, sometimes remember, if we have multiple choice, you notice you can look down here, you might be able to figure it out, but if you notice up here x 4.5, here x is 4.5. So the only thing I can do here is I can say, well, it's definitely not B and definitely not C. It's got to be A or B, A or D, sorry, A or D. So we got to work one more thing out here to find y. And so in this case here, here's 2y minus 3. And that's got 3 marks on it, that side, which matches up with what? 3 marks in this one, so that equals 2.5. So plus 3. So 2y equals 5.5. Divide by 2. 5.5 divided by 2. 2.75. So y is going to equal 2.75. Hopefully that's one of our answers. And if you look, it looks like it's right here, 2.75. And so magic red circle what's the answer. It's A. Okay, good. We were correct. 4.5 and 2.75. Okay, hopefully you're getting a good feel for those. All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about is the third angles theorem. This really kind of makes a lot of sense if you think about it. It basically just says if you have two triangles and you know that two of the angles are congruent to each other, the third one also has to be congruent. And so if you know that C is congruent to K and B is congruent to J, well then A and L also have to be congruent, because you think if the first two are congruent, how many do there have to be, how many degrees total in a triangle? 180. And so if you have to have 180 and the other two are equal, what's left has to also equal as well. Okay? So that's what's happening there. Here's a little example then to finish things out today. Drawing of a tower's roof is composed of congruent triangles. So all these are congruent triangles here. We can see like one in the front and a couple on the side. They all converge to a point on the top. If IJK is congruent to IKJ, so IJK and IKJ, that means these two are congruent here. Okay, those two are congruent. IJK is 72, so that means this is 72. We want to find JIH. JIH is, oh, this one up here. So this is one we're trying to find up here around the side. Well, what can we do here? Okay, well, you know all these triangles are congruent, so you know that this angle up here, JIH, is congruent to JIK. So this angle is congruent to that angle. Those two are congruent to each other. So what that means is if I can find out this one here, JIK, I know that JIH will also be the same thing. So how can I do that? Well, I know that this angle IJK here is 72. But I also know that because it told me here that these two angles are congruent, that this angle over here also has to be 72. Okay? And so we've got that at 72 and 72. What do I know about this triangle in general? How many degrees are there? 180. So that means if I have 180 degrees in that triangle and then I subtract both of those two angles, minus 72, minus 72, I will get 36. So that means this angle up here is 36 degrees. But that's not what we were asked for. We were asked for the measure of angle JIH. Okay? But we knew that since this triangle up front is congruent to this triangle on the side, that the angles that match up with each other have to be congruent as well. And so since JIK is 36, this angle over here, JIH, also has to be 36. Okay? That's it. Wow, that looked weird there. Okay, well, anyway, appreciate you being here. That's it for section 4.3. Hope you enjoyed that, and we will see you next time when we talk about section 4.4 and 4.5. We're going to talk about those two things together. See you then. Bye.